Late 1800s, there was a boy who was often ill, physically weak, and academically unremarkable. Doctors worried about his health, and teachers didn't describe him as gifted. That boy grew up to become Theodore Roosevelt, one of the most influential presidents in American history. Looking back, it raises a simple but unsettling question. If we had judged intelligence early, would we have called him smart? And what does that word really mean? When we say a baby is smart, what are we actually pointing to? Intelligence, potential, early development, or just our expectations? To answer this, scientists try to locate intelligence, first in the brain, then in genes, and eventually in numbers. So let's start with the brain. When Albert Einstein died in New Jersey, scientists believed they finally had a chance to see intelligence itself. His brain was removed, preserved, sliced, and studied, with the expectation that a genius brain would look extraordinary. But the most surprising discovery was this: nothing stood out. Einstein's brain was fairly average in size, structurally typical, and internally ordinary. Some regions were larger, some were smaller, some had more glial cells, and some parts were missing. But these kinds of variations appear in most human brains. The conclusion shocked researchers. Brain structure cannot predict intelligence. There is no genius-looking brain. So, if intelligence isn't hiding in brain structure, scientists began to ask a different question. What about how the brain actually works? Using non-invasive brain technologies, researchers studied problem-solving, sensory analysis, and reasoning. They identified around 14 brain regions involved in intelligence, but no two brains use those regions in the same way. When geniuses were studied, there were no reassuring similarities. Intelligence had no single pattern. So if intelligence isn't written into brain structure, what about genes? Researchers searched for a smart gene. They found links, such as genes associated with attention and short-term memory in some people. But the findings were inconsistent and difficult to replicate. This led scientists to the same conclusion: there is no single intelligence gene. At that point, researchers turned to numbers. The first serious attempt to measure intelligence came from Francis Galton. Galton believed intelligence was inherited. He measured reaction time, sensory ability, and physical traits. But these tests failed to capture real thinking. In 1905, a French psychologist changed the direction of intelligence research. Alfred Binet was asked to identify children who needed extra educational support. Instead of measuring senses, he focused on attention, memory, reasoning, and problem-solving. This approach became the first IQ test. But here's what's often forgotten. Binet never believed intelligence was fixed. He saw IQ as something that could change over time, shaped by age, environment, and situation. IQ was meant to inform, not define. So what does all of this mean for babies? They can't talk. They can't take IQ tests. Instead, researchers studied behavior, how long babies looked at patterns, whether they recognized objects they had touched before. Measurements taken between 2 and 8 months of age were able to predict IQ scores at 18, not perfectly, but well enough to reveal something important. Intelligence doesn't suddenly appear later in life. It is already forming, quietly, very early on. This brings us to a different way of thinking about intelligence. If intelligence isn't one score, what is it made of? Not a number, not a gene, but ingredients. Think of intelligence less like a spreadsheet and more like a stew. The same ingredients are present, but in different proportions. Every child is a different mix. The ingredients include curiosity, self-control, creativity, verbal communication, and nonverbal communication. Let's start with the first ingredient: the desire to explore. The desire to explore is what drives learning forward. It pushes a child to ask questions, test ideas, and wonder how things work. In studies of thousands of executives, the most creative individuals shared 3 traits. They connected unrelated ideas, they asked what if and why not, and they had a strong urge to experiment. All of this can be summarized in one word: inquisitiveness. But curiosity alone isn't enough. To explore deeply, the brain needs another ability, the ability to focus. The second ingredient is self-control. Self-control isn't about obedience, it's about regulation. It allows the brain to pause, resist distraction, and stay with the problem long enough to learn from it. In a long-term study, children who could delay gratification for about 15 minutes later scored, on average, more than 200 points higher on their SATs than those who couldn't wait even a minute. That difference wasn't about intelligence at birth. It reflected the brain's ability to regulate attention. Once curiosity and focus are in place, something else emerges. The third ingredient is creativity. Creativity allows the mind to move beyond what already exists. It isn't chaos. Highly creative people are more comfortable with ambiguity. They can sit with uncertainty. Psychologist Paul Torrance developed tests that measured imagination rather than correct answers. Children were asked to improve a toy, finish a picture, or invent a story. Decades later, these scores predicted real-world creative achievement better than IQ ever did. Ideas, however, don't exist in isolation. They need a way to be shaped, shared, and refined. That brings us to language. The fourth ingredient is verbal communication. At birth, babies can hear the sound differences of every language on Earth. By around 1 year of age, that ability narrows, not because the brain loses power, but because it specializes. Language learning is not passive, it's relational. Brains wire themselves through voices, faces, timing, and response. Language doesn't just express thought, it helps shape it. And even before words appear, communication is already happening. The fifth ingredient is nonverbal communication. Long before babies speak, they read faces, tone, and expression. Learning nonverbal communication activates brain networks linked to empathy, cooperation, and social understanding. This kind of learning cannot come from screens. It requires people. So, what do all these pieces tell us? Intelligence isn't one thing. It isn't a brain shape, a gene, or a number. It's a combination of systems working together. Curiosity, focus, imagination, language, social understanding. Genes matter, roughly 50%, but they don't dictate outcomes. They set possibilities. Environment determines how much of that potential is realized. IQ measures something real, but not everything that matters. Intelligence isn't assigned at birth. It is assembled over time. And that's why asking, "Is my baby smart?" may be the wrong question. The better question is this: what ingredients are coming together right now? Which parts of intelligence are being nurtured today? If you're raising a child or hope to one day, and this helped you see intelligence a little differently, please like this video and subscribe for more science-based, compassionate conversations about parenting and growing minds.